But then it's quite nice. My girlfriend has family in north of Skåne and relatives also close by. So it's quite a good location and also quite close to the west coast where I'm from. So
Älmhult, isn't that in more of the eastern part of Småland, or where is it? I'm a bit confused here.
Yeah, my geography is not. It's not in the eastern part. It's not close by the coast. So it's more mid of Sweden.
Close to Växjö or something, or is it?
Yeah, I think it's southwest from Växjö.
Okay.
I might make a fool out of myself now, but it might be that.
Should
but I think it's like
buy a school.
Yeah, it was crazy, but it was an amazing opportunity. It's a nice like house with what is called kakelugnar and a lot of character.
A big building as well, or
quite big, 310 square meters, I think.
Right. Like 20 rooms or something, or
no. It's, I think it's 8 rooms, but then they have the old school building, or school room where they had the classes. Yeah. So that's quite big. I think that's like 60 square meters or so. And then on the upper floor they had the gymnastics. So it's like one big room, 96 square meters.
Basically? Yeah, really.
So we plan to have a ping pong table and place to hang out for the kids.
But that sounds really cool. But that's a little bit bigger than a summer.
Some invitation for the ping pong once you have it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm from Småland as well, so that sounds like
it.
Yeah. But how come you bought a school building? It's very strange to me. Can you just what attracted you to it?
I think a couple of things. It's a cool idea to fix it up. It has a lot of character and a lot of potential, a lot of things to do, of course, but still in good shape, so we don't need to fix it up from scratch.
Are you going to rent it out in parts, or what's you going to use it for, or just use it for yourself? Or
yeah, I mean that's the main idea, and I think also like long term, it would be good to have first of all a place where all children can have their own rooms, potentially also when they sort of find some partners or get kids on their own, to be like a place to gather for a long time. Yeah. So looking at the prices closer to Stockholm is you don't get that much house for the price we paid. So
awesome. And you haven't bought it yet, or you don't?
We have paid the down payment.
Right. Okay.
So we have sort of committed to it.
Mm. Any date when you can move in potentially?
Yeah, 25th of March.
Really? This month?
So quite soon. So we're sort of planning on what to buy first, like clean it up and buy beds.
Are you going to have like a housewarming party or something? And am I invited?
I haven't planned that much yet, but you will be definitely invited. I think we'll have more sort of open door policy. Everyone who wants to come by is welcome.
You need to have some big computer cluster room or something, like a server hall or something, right?
I have planned for an office/music studio in one of the rooms.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's planned.
Music with what, like pianos or guitars, or what's your?
One piano was included in the house, and also one of those school organs is also there. So we got a lot of old stuff with the building.
Yeah.
So it will probably be piano in that room, but then also, I mean, I'm doing some music production, electronic music in my spare time. So that's a good place where I can actually put my speakers and
sounds awesome.
Try out things.
You have to extend an invitation, especially during the summer times. If you have get some nice weather during the vacation or something, and come down to Småland and my old home area, so to speak. That would be awesome.
Where in Småland? Where are you from?
Kalmar, Oskarshamn, so the eastern part of
Småland.
Yeah, but it's not that far. You usually have to go by train, through Växjö or something anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
Through that. Awesome. So with that, welcome here, Daniel Tidström.
Thanks. We've
known each other for quite some time, I think. Is it like 7 years now or something?
Yeah, I think so. First Data Innovation Summit.
Right. You're one of the original people from being first in the inaugural.
I like that, the originals.
The originals.
I should get like T-shirts or something.
Yeah, and of course, one of the experts, in AI and data science in Sweden. So it's a true pleasure to have you here. And let's start with that. How would you describe yourself? Who is Daniel Tidström?
I'm nowadays a pretty old ex-Gothenburg person.
Are you from Gothenburg? You can't hear that though.
No, I think it's unfortunately sort of worn off. I haven't lived in Gothenburg since 94, I think.
Okay.
Then I studied in Jönköping, so also a Småland connection, and then moved up here. But I would say I'm a very curious person, serial nerd. I always have some
serial
topic.
Nerd? What does that mean?
I get passionately interested in new things and just want to sort of dive deep. But then sort of my patience probably runs out when I get to a certain depth of it, and then I rather sort of expand horizontally. So I'm probably not the best at anything, but I have a fairly broad perspective on things.
And a bit humble as well, I think.
I don't know.
Cool. But if we move back a bit from the beginning, and what was your field of study to begin with?
Business administration.
Right. So it wasn't the technical.
No,
education.
which is a bit odd.
What is really business administration? Can you just elaborate on a bit more what that means for a tech nerd like myself?
Yeah, I can try. I studied natural science at gymnasiet. Right. But at that time, I couldn't really connect the use cases for all the maths and physics. And I was also a bit tired of school, and sort of had quite an easy way in school up to that time. And then all of a sudden I had to study and I didn't have the energy for it. So I ended up with business administration, which I think, I don't know why really, but I think what you learn it's basically two sides of it. I studied international business administration. So more like how are organizations and companies run, and how do the markets where they operate on behave. So it's both economics, micro and macro, but primarily how do you set up an organization? How do you set up business control systems like KPIs? But then we had a lot of leadership and entrepreneurship in Jönköping. So that was quite fun as well. So every course block, we had a company that we were attached to, so we could do practical work at the same time as studying, which I found quite interesting, because then you can see, not only learn the theory, but also try it out in practice, which is, I think, also a trait that I have. I want to see or understand how can I use this.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool. But then after your studies, what was the next step?
That was management trainee at Scania.
Scania, right.
So that was, there is sort of a red thread, even if you look at my CV, you don't see it clearly. But I was interested in data and numbers already back then. Yeah. But then I was totally naive and thought that, okay, if I go to a professional company like Scania, that is the best in its business, more or less, they probably have a lot of data available, and I can sort of work with controlling and take decisions and understand that thing. Yeah. But then it was a brutal awakening when I actually started working and finding out that they didn't have all the numbers, and there were a lot of broken processes and things like that. Right. But I started out in 99, where in the middle of the sort of IT boom, everyone thought I was stupid because everyone started working either as a management consultant or with a tech company. But I felt at that time that I didn't really believe the hype at that time. It felt that it was a bubble coming up, and fortunately, or sort of, I was right in the end. Yeah. But also I felt I had so much more to learn, and going in a trainee program to really get a deep understanding of how a company of that size runs and why was quite interesting.
Was it some specific part of Scania that you?
I had a lot of. I started out with on industrial and marine engines. Right. So trying to look at how is the value increase of engines in production, and how do you like do that accounting? So I was also trying to figure out how information flows between systems worked. And then I did a portfolio on R&D, portfolio analysis on like what are the most important projects and how do you manage them and how do you work between project organization and a line organization, like where do the handshakes take place?
How do you organize that? What is the right setup to have both a line organization and a product organization? I think it's actually still a valid topic for today.
It is. I think it applies quite a lot also to our domain, where I mean, it takes different disciplines and different skill sets to deliver on data and AI. And a functional organization can sometimes prevent that unless you sort of figure out a way to work across silos. But I don't know if there is any right answer, but what we did then, I think, I might remember wrong, but trying to basically move people from the line organization into the project organization and have like clear guidelines on like basically scoping and stuff like that. So it was...
But I guess another question could be more like you still want to have people, if we take more like a product organization, you want to build something, potentially software, or it could be hardware, I guess in Scania's case as well. Then you can argue that you can have a line organization where the people report in some kind of line, but you can also have a different organization in how people are grouped according to product teams or something.
Exactly.
Right? And Spotify, of course, had their kind of way of doing this with squads and chapters and some kind of reversed matrix organizational shape in some way.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any like best practices or favorite ideas of how to best set up so you have both I guess one way to phrase this is you want the product teams potentially, and please disagree if you don't agree with it, but you want potentially the product teams to be cross-functional in terms of they need to have the competences necessary to build some product, and no single person can have all the competences. So you have to have a mix of these kind of skills to be able to build their product. But at the same time, you want to have people that can communicate with people of their own peers in some way.
Exactly.
And that could be more of the functional kind of dimension of it.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? How can you find both the cross-functional kind of grouping of people while at the same time having like a functional way of communicating or grouping people?
I would say, I mean, it is a trade-off, but I think you can manage it. I think there is like an evolving way based on maturity. I mean, normally it starts with like a centralized analytics and data team. Normally, from what I've at least experienced is that the data team is split going into tech, and then the sort of analytics remains within sort of product or finance or something. But then after a while, when a company scale, it will be hard because you're depending on requirements, and to get good requirements, it needs you have to rely on people actually understanding what the potential is in using data and analytics. And
knowing the domain in some way, right?
Yeah. So I think that's a problem after a while. And then from what I've seen and what I've applied myself is going into a hybrid mode. So you maybe retain some central resources, but then, as you say, embed analysts and data scientists into teams. So I've done that in many places like Cambi and Epidemic Sound, Spotify as well, where I was as a consultant. So we had a clear cross-functional teams with product managers that were actually trying to drive improvements on like user experience and things like that. So then of course connecting the other level is like through practices. So I've normally said that what needs to be done and why, that should be those decisions should be taken in the team that has all the context. But then sort of how and the who perspective, like hiring, I can probably do best from like a professional like discipline level.
So given, I mean, you worked with a lot of companies, either as an employee or as a consultant as well. So you have like a large, like diverse experience from how companies are set up. What would be your recommendation, though, for someone that haven't really figured this out yet, or I guess no one really has in a great way? But you mentioned something about the hybrid potential organization with some kind of centralized part and then some kind of embedded part as well. Is that your...
Yeah, I think so. If you, at Epidemic Sound, for example, I was hired to set up a new embedded organization called Product Analytics from the beginning. But then we still had a central team. But then we had like different managers. We had some coordination issues because we basically a data team had one manager, I had one, and BI had one. And that is hard. So we tried to group that under one umbrella in the end to at least get alignment and so on.
Yeah.
And I think it's also often why there is a trend that people or companies appoint C-level like chief data officers or chief analytic officers. Because after a while, when you get multiple teams and you get more strategic value, you need to have quite a holistic perspective while still retaining autonomy and local decision making as much as possible.
Right, because that's one of the core things, I guess. I mean, if you do have a cross-functional team that have some autonomy and can move quickly and iterate quickly on the product, that, I guess, is one of the objectives you want to have.
Definitely. And also, right. I think, at least from my side, it doesn't make sense when you reach a certain scale, when you have multiple stakeholders that you work with and you have a team that is a certain size. If you as a manager becomes the sort of central point and need to triage everything and assign all work to all people, that is a bottleneck.
Doesn't scale.
No, it doesn't scale. So I think eventually you need to figure out how to solve scalability. And I think that is, I think, a trend in many ways, also with like data meshes and stuff like that, is like the same premise. Like, how do you scale a monolith, basically? And you can't just do it by throwing more people onto the problem. You need to probably think a bit outside the box and figure out how to do it without sacrificing other things.
So just to summarize a bit, I mean, you can think about, I guess, two extremes here. Either we have just a single like line organization, everything is going through some manager, and that will have, as you say, some bottleneck issues and scalability issues, but it will be super aligned, I guess, everything. But the speed will probably be bad, and autonomy will be really poor, and motivation probably will be poor as well if everything is, going top down in that way. But then I guess, and please do disagree, the other extreme could be if you have only like embedded teams, that they don't get like some kind of critical mass. If you take data science or analytics, and you want to have some kind of more infrastructure support or some way of building system or deploying system or doing that. And if you just have a single person working in a product team without support from any kind of centralized team potentially that knows how to do things and can build these kind of supporting systems, they will never scale as well, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that is also why I sort of tend to go with a hybrid model, maybe in the same organizational structure, because then you can look at, like, for example, when is the right time to invest in structuring your data and documenting your data and making sure that lineage is available and that you have logging of errors and changes and stuff like that. I mean, it happens when for one person, the cost of error is probably quite small, but if you extrapolate that on a bigger team, it becomes substantial after a while. So I think it's also finding that balance, which I think also is one of the nice things I like with the whole sort of platform thinking in general. I mean,
and what do you mean with platform thinking?
No, but I mean, after a while, most companies probably end up with a platform team in tech that doesn't deliver customer features, but delivers productivity features for the engineers.
Supporting systems.
Exactly. And I think it's the same for data, for example. Like when is it worthwhile to have a few more data engineers to actually improve the productivity of the data science team? I mean, when you start scaling up and running many A/B tests each day or each week, you need infrastructure to do it.
Yeah.
So I think it's the way we normally approach it also from when we give advice is to do it first, maybe the cheap way, and find value. And when you see that you want to run it again, but the cost of achieving that value one more time is prohibitively or sort of increasing, then you need to invest in making it more efficient. So I think it's iterating on that and trying to find some kind of balance.
Sounds great. And if we just imagine some company out there and they now want to invest in becoming, much more data and AI driven in some way, and they don't have any kind of budget restraints here. They just want to do it as quickly as they can. I guess you can think about two ways to do it. Either you start off with three ways to do it. But okay, you can start off by building like embedded team support. You add a lot of people to different product teams that you have. And then later, perhaps you start to see that you want to build these kind of supporting systems so you can scale them, or you can do the opposite, which is to start with a centralized system and then later start to spill over, so to speak, into some kind of embedded organization or hybrid organization. Do you have any preference there? Start with a centralized or start with embedded?
I think based on mistakes I've made myself, I think it makes sense to start with a centralized team first until you get some level of maturity and then scale out. But you don't have to make everything perfect. It's again, finding some kind of balance. But I mean, if you have no idea about what are the core KPIs and core metrics that you're working with, you have no documentation on the data setup, it tends to be a bit chaotic. There is some governance that I think is best at least to have first. And I have made that mistake, good to go too soon. And also, I mean, if you have, it's also, I think, leadership and like employee satisfaction. If you go into as a single data scientist into a team that isn't very mature in how to work with data, it's easy to feel alienated in that setup as well.
Yes, yeah.
And
I understand that.
That's a learning that's quite recent as well. So I'm probably becoming a bit wiser every time.
Well, you worked with Spotify, and so I can, especially from those years, remember those times where if you had a single data analyst or something working in a product team, and you have a product owner that is just thinking about the next iteration.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's very important to have, how should I frame this? And I mean, product teams that are accountable for business outcome rather than product features. Because if you are accountable for business outcomes, it becomes sort of self-preservation to measure things and log things and learn things.
Yeah, that's a good
point. If you're only measured on producing features,
right, functionality,
then, exactly. I mean, then running an A/B test will maybe add a week or so to time to market, and so I think it's very important to really know why are you building what you're building, what's the purpose, what's the reasoning, what are the sort of the hypothesis that you base it on, and try to be really sort of true to yourself. I think that's a big gap. We can probably iterate back to that.
Well, I'm very glad that you said that in that way, and you prefer to start in a centralized way. I think also that's the core thing to do. You need to have some critical mass to be able to do anything that you can later scale. Yeah. And I tried not to bias you in any way, but you chose the same thinking that I have. So very happy for that.
Good. So we don't have to start out with a fight.
Yeah, well, that's great. I think that's actually a very important learning that a lot of companies haven't done. That you need some kind of critical mass to get things working properly. Otherwise, it just will be prototypes, and they will never really show off in any kind of business outcome or positive outcome that you can measure.
Exactly.
Okay, that was a bit of a rant on the line versus product organization, but it's an important topic, I think.
I think so. I think it's one of the most critical ones.
Yeah.
I think it's a source of a lot of problems today.
Yeah.
Especially on the data side.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that was Scania and some other
plus
companies.
Some other places, yeah.
What happened after Scania?
Maybe I should sort of go through to just keep the red thread what happened in Scania. I think after the trainee program, I got because that's when I got into data, really. I got an assignment to basically support the smaller market subsidiaries with the financial systems support, because they didn't have that. So they basically sort of reinvented the wheel every time there was a new CFO. So we looked at, we basically benchmarked like how's the best way to structure the financial model based on the outputs that we wanted, like legal and fiscal reporting, management reporting, and group reporting. Made a good information model, put it into the system, and then implemented that. So that was basically my job at that time, going from country to country, implementing that. After a while, we found out that we had a lot of good information in the system, but we couldn't get it out in a good way. So that's when my sort of data journey started. I just had like, we need to solve this because the value of the accounting is not realized because we can't get the data out in a good way. Right, so that was when I got into actually just opening my laptop, finding a SQL database at that time, building some views to just translate column names and table names. Then we've found some problems, so it developed into a data warehouse, and then it was like OLAP cubed and reporting layers, and I had to build a user interface to manage the thing because I was sort of every beginning of every year I was hassled by all the companies that needed support to sort of roll the years. So I had to learn coding to figure that out. Cool. So that was like the starting point of my data journey. Really building a data warehouse before even sort of really having the notion of that it's called like that, more solving a problem.
And what year was this approximately?
This was trainee program started in 99 and then was going all the way through end of 2000. So I think this was like between 2001 and 2005.
I guess data warehousing wasn't a concept at that time.
It sort of was, but it was quite rudimentary. It was like Microsoft stack that we had. Tools were called differently. Cognos was the coolest BI tool out there. But it is some good learnings. It was a good school. Finance is really a good data warehousing school because it's like a star schema as it is, and transactions are immutable. You cannot change a transaction. You can only counter a transaction. So it's like an event log in a more modern system. So it has a lot of good.
I haven't thought about that, but that's true. I mean, the finance has a lot of like similarities to the kind of OLAP kind of structure, type of data structures.
And also like write-ahead logging as well, that it's immutable structures, append only. So it was quite good. And then I moved on to actually try to actually work with what I studied. So I took a business controller job. Found that I enjoyed the sort of more strategic things of that, setting up like proper KPIs, measuring things, but also
like still at Scania?
No, it was Markham and Marsh, industrial company selling marking equipment.
Marking? What does that
It's like this barcodes and best before dates and laser engraving in the like Absolute vodka bottles for counter forfeiting things. Okay, cool. So like a very hidden product, but we had all the major industrial firms in Sweden basically. So it was a lot of time trying to figure out, first the finances, and then I did a post-sales work. So I was after sales manager, trying to just sort of what happens after you buy an equipment. How do you make it run? How do you finance it? How do you solve things if they break? So it was the first sort of management job. But after that, I had like the first big career crisis where I felt like, okay, I don't want to do finance. I don't want to work with after sales. I kind of like numbers and I kind of like data and IT, and I always end up in IT projects because I think, at least I hope it's because I am fairly adept at that and have an easy way to learn. But then I started working in BI and I've sort of BI analytics, and I've stayed there since. So that was 2010.
2010. And that was, right. Was that when you were at SIDA as well, or was that later?
That was a bit later, actually.
Okay.
This was at Open Systems, small BI / performance management firm.
We were consultancy or what type of?
Product company and consultancy. So they had a small, basically from the beginning, a small just Excel plugin that had a big benefit. So it basically was like you could write SQL queries from Excel to database connection, and then you could like pinpoint information where it goes into for example, an income statement or balance sheet. So it was quite effective solution.
Yeah. Interesting.
Started there as a BI consultant, did some solution architecture and pre-sales. So kind of like having discussions with customers about solving problems. And then I ended up product manager for the company as well. Probably because the product manager, when he quit, I was the person that was nagging him all the time about new things we needed.
So what does the product manager do, say?
Trying to set the strategic direction and market positioning of the product, working with pricing, and then basically trying to figure out what the users need, somehow prioritize that, describe it into features, and try to deliver
product features that they want to build in some way. Awesome. And perhaps we should skip ahead a bit here as well. Or it would be fun to move into Svenska Spel, etc. Or is it anything you want to mention before we move into that?
No, maybe not. I think the year at Connecta as a management consultant was a bit of a sabbatical for trying to figure out what to do. So I can skip by that quite quickly. But that was when I was really getting into advanced analytics.
Okay.
And also I think the embryo of our company. I met one of our co-founders at Connecta, where we basically tried to connect the sort of the management consulting part of the business with actually delivering solutions. Because I think we saw at that time that, I had an interest in numbers and data from a long time. But when sort of everything started going digital and mobiles were coming and social networks were coming, it just made sense. Like now we have so much data. Data is really the sort of the voice of the customer in many cases. Yeah. So it just made perfect sense looking at sort of what the big tech companies were doing and how they were solving problems of dealing with that data. So I was like really, really interested in big data, started running Hadoop clusters at home and learning advanced analytics despite my finance background.
While still at Connecta? Or?
Yeah.
And for people that don't, Hadoop perhaps is not as prevalent as it was at those times. What is Hadoop and why what's the advantage you can get with having that type of cluster?
I think there are multiple things. I remember a customer meeting where I actually just did a whiteboard exercise where I equaled like traditional databases with, one of those child toys with the lid on where you can put like different shaped boxes in. That's like a typical database. And if you run out of space, it's really hard to grow. You basically need to buy a bigger box. Yeah. And also if you get something that is not shaped according to what the lid allows, you can't store it. Yeah. So
hard to scale and very rigid, right?
Exactly. So being able to just add nodes to a cluster to handle volume is one interesting aspect, and also being able to apply some schema on read, or at least be able to store files that are not always as you expect to receive them is powerful. And then I can argue now that maybe it was taken too far with data lakes without schemas, that it created a lot of problems, but that's of course one learning. So that is why I got interested in Svenska Spel, because they were one of the, I think earlier at least, sort of mainstream players on Hadoop. I think, Spotify and King obviously had it since a couple of years. But I think sort of Svenska Spel and Klarna was sort of about the same stage. So I got the data architect position at Svenska Spel, which I found quite interesting. Not that I'm like super interested in betting and gambling, but it's a lot of sort of famous brands that are well known. They have a huge customer base.
Lots of data, I guess, as well.
Yeah, tons of data. Yeah. And also both sort of digital data, but also like point of sales data and casino data. It's like a very, very interesting business and a lot of touch points and how should I say, business areas.
Yeah. Can you mention some of the tech stack that you were having at Svenska Spel?
Yes, we had a Hadoop solution. Later on, going with Hortonworks, which was the distribution. We had, no, I forgot the name. We had one streaming solution because Svenska Spel was actually quite cool in that case. I don't think people realized that. I didn't, for sure, because I thought it was a state-owned company. They're probably not that advanced. But they had, since 2006, I think, basically an in-house Kafka solution that they built.
Oh, that they built themselves?
Yeah. So they stored an immutable event log from 2006. So when I went in there in 2014, we could just sort of load 8 years of data immutable on event level into the system, which is quite cool. So, but that was built on C# and we needed to translate it. So I had a translator feeding into Kafka, Kafka loading it into, if I remember correctly now, both HDFS, which is a distributed file system.
On Hadoop,
Yeah, and also into Solar, actually, to index that. I think you actually asked why when we met first time. But that was to basically have a real-time transaction index so we can search on, if we get a support ticket, we can search on an event or a customer and we get the real-time data.
And just to elaborate a bit more, because you have so much knowledge about different open source tools as well. And Kafka, of course, is more of like a message queue. Or how did you describe Kafka? Sort of real-time streaming.
I don't know, event bus, maybe.
Yeah, could be something.
But it's
you can send events to it, and you can subscribe for different topics, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Subscribe, publish, subscribe.
PubSub, as Google call it.
Exactly. But also that you can retain the data as well, so you can consume it multiple times, and if a consumer goes down, the data sort of just builds up in Kafka. So you don't drop data. You have like
it's
allowance to up
way to stream events.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm not a Kafka expert by any means, but it's a great system. Yeah. A bit complex to operate as the rest of the Hadoop stack, but
Hadoop.
It's much simpler today.
Yeah, but then you mentioned Solar as well, and I guess another alternative is Elasticsearch as well.
Yeah.
Do you have any preference or thoughts about Solar versus Elasticsearch?
Not really. I haven't sort of used that much. I have done some tests, and I think Elasticsearch is super user friendly to set up. I haven't worked that much in production, but we use that too. I think
how would you describe what Solar and Elasticsearch does? Full text indexing, or
exactly, indexing and like searching out, fetching individual records really, really quickly. I think we had we used it to serve content to the websites. So basically everything that had like really low latency requirement were basically in Elastic or Solar in that case. Actually, I made a mistake. We had, before we sent it to HDFS, we actually stored it in HBase as well.
Oh, HBase. Oof, I have a lot of memories of that as well. I guess HBase and Cassandra are two like a similar kind of solutions there as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. We had Cassandra was the main tool outside the data stack. But I think HBase was part of the distribution, so that was the way we went. That was in place before I joined, so...
I still have some horrible memories of HBase when working with this Price Runner founder's second endeavor, which was called Test Freaks. We were launched throughout the world in China and US and like 30 different countries. And then at one point, HBase just crashed.
Yeah.
And we couldn't recover it.
Oh, really?
And it was a large number of nodes with so much data into it. And we were trying to hack the source code to try to get around the problems we had. We called every kind of expert, someone from Germany that's supposed to help us. We're sitting there like day and night for 2 days trying to solve it. And finally we got it back, but it was horrific times. It's nice when it's working, but when it actually breaks, oof, Jesus Christ, trying to solve it.
I didn't experience that, luckily. And also we had, the good thing was that we had what was called, let me see, if I remember. No, never mind. But I mean, we had a persistent data store in the back, so which was also a super nice thing, because if we wanted to do a change that was complex, we could basically truncate the whole data platform and just rerun it. Since it was immutable, we didn't have any state to consider. It was like super nice. It was basically a set of lines of code that we just needed to run.
So if Solo and Elasticsearch is more for one, like working with text and indexing that and finding stuff very quickly and in real time being able to retrieve things, how would you describe HBase and Cassandra? What's their difference to perhaps Solar and Elasticsearch? I
mean, the way we used, I was a bit wrong before, but we stored the data in HBase, but then we had to retrieve it by key. So we couldn't really search for it. So that was what we used Solar for.
But key, couldn't you use the HBase if you have the key?
Yeah, exactly. If we had a key. Yeah. But the key was just some... I might be off now. I have to talk to maybe Johan Pettersson that helped us out. He built that. Yeah. But I think the key was not... It didn't have any business meaning. It was just a key with some salt to get the distribution of the data. So to figure out where it was, we needed to use Solar to actually fetch the right things.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Cool. And of course, Cassandra is a big part of the Spotify tech stack as well.
I can imagine. But I mean, it's super fast. If you know the key to the record that you want, it's like amazing.
Yeah. Then we can have a lot of columns for a single key, and that row can have families of columns and so much more. So it's more of a NoSQL kind of quick retrieval of key values in some way.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, so many interesting stuff. We're going a bit technical here because Henrik is not here, so we can actually go a bit techy. So that's kind of fun, at least for me.
With some limitations.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so Svenska Spel, and they had a huge amount of data. And what were like the main products or type of tooling that you were working with there?
We had multiple things. It was quite exciting because it was in the early days. What we wanted to do, I mean, setting up the actual big data stack that was mainly in place when I joined. So what I tried to do was basically replace the current data warehouse structure that had become outdated, both from a technical perspective and also from a business perspective. It wasn't relevant anymore. It was like a new company, putting the customers in center instead of like the stores and the retail site. So I think basically it was like the fourth week at work, I had to do a presentation for the CIO, telling him that we need to rebuild the whole thing. So that was I'm quite impressed with my manager at that time, Christian, that actually allowed me to come with those conclusions.
Yeah.
But I think it was like a fairly strong case that was the most effective solution. So then we tried to figure out like how to run that, and we had some consultants in as well. So basically going with a data lake in HDFS with the Hive data warehouse on top to try to sort of figure out where the data is. So we had like one transformation layer there, but then taking it to a more data warehouse structure that was needed. We did it in many iterations. First, we were looking at different ways of doing it. I was a big proponent of Spark at that time, but we ended up
What year was this, by the way?
Sorry?
Which year was this?
I think 2014. So it was...
Yeah.
It was...
And that's kind of early. Spark was just at the first versions. Was it even 1.0 at that time?
I don't remember, but I know what really made me hook into it. We tried a lot of things. We tried like cascading. We tried scrolling, which is a Scala DSL on top of cascading. So we had like a lot of communication with Twitter to try to make it work. But then, we looked also. We had a lot. I don't remember all the tools and frameworks. That was the problem back then. That there were so many frameworks and so many ways to solve the same problem. It wasn't really like a clear leader. Yeah. But I hooked on to Spark when they released the data frame API.
Right. From RDDs back to
exactly
data frames.
Because RDDs is like still. I'm lazy. I like to have like a sort of typed data set where I can call columns by name. It makes
and it's similar to pandas and much more familiar, and to R as well. I guess.
And it had also like the brilliant function that I love the most. That's dot to pandas function. Right. Where you can actually like you can work, which is also what I presented on the Data Innovation Summit. So we can basically we put a Jupyter tool on top, so we can actually run from one interface code fetching data from Kafka, HBase, the data lake, Hive, or external other data warehouses with one coding framework. And we can process the data on the cluster.
So that was Spark, and you could connect to all these kind of data sources.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And when we had massaged the data, because one early conclusion as well is you don't want to work with big data unless you have to. You want to get to small data as quickly as possible. And then we could take it offline with the two pandas with just one function. And then you can go with all the scikit-learn and matplotlib or whatever you want to do with the data. So that was pretty amazing. I think really cool at that time. Really quite obsolete now.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if Spotify, I was a big proponent for Spark as well at that time. And but no one at Spotify really was actually.
No, I mean now it's SIO.
Yeah, like exactly. SIO. And on Dataflow, which is Google's managed thing instead of Spark. Cool. So once again, a lot of different tooling here, and that is more for, I guess, like big data processing in some way. So Spark, scalding, cascading. I guess Dataflow these days would be counted a Flink, I guess. Yeah. Have you ever tried Flink, by the way? Or?
We did try it. We had we used Flink a lot for the streaming ingestion from Kafka. I didn't run it myself. That was the other data engineers that did it. I actually switched after a while from the data team to the data science team because we found that that's where the sort of pain point moved. And also I was very curious to actually try out building things and crunching logs and trying to build some models.
Cool. Okay. So, but can you give some examples? What did you try to build in Svenska Spel? So you used a lot of tooling here for processing, big data with, HBase and Hive. And Hive, I guess, is just, trying to map an SQL query to some Hadoop job that can run.
Yeah.
And then you have, all the Spark and scaldings and whatnot. But for what purpose?
Mainly reporting.
Okay, reporting purposes.
Yeah. We did some work to try to enable basically on we had some models like propensity models and cluster models that were running on SAS at that time.
Yeah. How would you describe SAS, by the way?
I don't know. I'll probably just make a lot of enemies, I guess. But to me, it felt like at that time, I was a strong open source proponent. I felt that this will be the future. SAS will not be the future. Python or R will be what wins. Yeah. That is why because we had a situation as well at Svenska Spel where we had lagen om offentlig upphandling. I guess you know all about that.
Unfortunately.
So either we had to buy more advanced tooling on SAS, which would take a lot of pains and admin work and be quite expensive, or we could just deploy Jupyter, which we actually did just as a skunk work, basically from Monday to a Thursday. We set up a full working solution with Jupyter Hub, spawning Docker containers with like local instances and attaching all the frameworks that we needed on it. So it was quite just a skunk work with the DevOps in Gotland. So
DevOps running on
so I think basically I just wanted to show them that this is how fast we can run if we want to, rather than sort of going into a 9-month procurement cycle. So with that, then we did some things, but we didn't really get any sort of spark jobs into production before I then left for new ventures.
So what were the main tools you used for reporting then? Was that HBase and Hive stuff, or what was the...
We went from a stack where we had files loaded into Oracle, going into Cognos, and Microsoft Analysis Services cubes.
Oh, really?
And then we went from Hadoop. We still had Cognos. We actually changed that to Exasol a while after I left, and Tableau on top.
Tableau as well. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that sounds like a good stack.
So
Exasol is very fast, right?
Yeah, I never got to try it, but it's solved. I mean, we did Oracle Exadata is good for transformation jobs, but as we offloaded that to Hadoop and did it with Hive and HiveQL, the job of the data warehouse was to basically answer aggregation queries as quickly as possible. And then Oracle wasn't the best tool anymore. So that is why we started looking at Exasol, because then we could basically cutting some costs, even going with a tool that does the new job much faster.
And can you just give an example of what kind of reporting did you need to do? Was it for your own purposes internally, or reporting to some other governments, or what was that?
I mean, we had some fraud things as well. That I, of course, can't go into in details, but I mean, match fixing, for example, is one thing that pops up. There are other things that we need to figure out. We were looking also at the sort of responsible gambling side of things.
So if someone gets like addicted to gambling, you want to find that somehow.
Yeah, exactly. And then it was very much business reporting. I think the first case we looked at was the Vegas machines, which was also quite a lot of, at that time at least, transactions, because basically every spin on every machine was streamed into a backend and then fed into Kafka. So it was billions of events we tried to sort of parse out and report on.
And Vegas machines, you basically means this kind of bandit or one-arm bandit kind of machines?
Exactly.
Is it true that they are used mainly to launder money, you think? Or some people claim so? I have no idea.
I don't know either, but maybe. I mean, it's the payout is quite good, so you can spin a few times and still retain some money.
Yeah. Okay, very interesting. A lot of technical talk there. And we miss Henrik, by the way. Love you, Henrik. Hope you are not getting too irritated with us speaking tech all the time. But then, okay, Svenska Spel, and then you took another leap, so to speak. What was the next move?
The next move was my second career crisis, where I basically tried to figure out, do I want to go on as a data scientist? And to me, I thought that was really fun. I love that type of work, but at the same time, I realized that I don't have maybe the mathematical background that could be useful. So it was a bit of a pain point. I had to spend a lot of time trying to sort of freshen up like linear algebra and stuff like that to be able to really read documentation properly and understand like the to get a sort of what's called like an feeling for how the models actually worked. Like what's that called?
Intuition for
exactly,
how they work.
Exactly. So, and also it was like management, because I'm quite generic and has like decent technical knowledge, but also decent in understanding business concepts and how value is created.
And rather decent in being humble as well. That's okay.
I mean, I leave it for others to judge. No, but I, of course, also confident in what I know and what I don't, obviously. But I actually applied for 2 jobs at that time. So I applied for one data science position at King,
Oh,
and head of analytics at Kambi, which is a sports betting company again. Yeah. So I went through like I think it was like 6 or 7 interviews with King. Yeah. Met some great people where we talked mainly computer games, I think. So it was nice. But in the end,
did you meet someone called Björn there?
No, not Björn.
Okay.
But some other well-known Matte and other people.
Cool.
But eventually they turned me down based on that I was a bit weak on stats, which they were totally right on. And they were asking me like, maybe you should be more like a business performance manager. So they sort of hinted me in that direction as well during the process, but I sort of stuck with the data science position. But then I got a job in Kambi instead as head of analytics. Right. So I outsourced that decision. And I think it was the right one.
Yeah, of course. And you were sitting very close to our Peltorian office as well when we. Okay. You were on the floor below, right?
At Kambi. Yeah. At Wallengatan. Or
is it called Wallengatan?
It was before. I think they moved now to.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So they were somewhere else at that time. Okay, cool.
No. So they were neighbors to you. I remember when we met. Basically, your office was near to the Adolf Fredrik, the church.
Yeah.
Right. So Peltorian is exactly behind the Adolf Fredrik.
Church. It is. Okay. Yeah. Then it's really close.
Okay. Yeah. It's just one floor below.
Cool.
Or above. Obviously. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. So can we start perhaps? What does Kambi do?
Kambi is. They're developing and selling a sports book, which is basically taking care of all sports betting practices, including the user interface, the event selection and pricing, and all the backend components like risk management and things like that.
So what is the customer basically for Kambi?
Betting operators. It's actually the starting point of Kambi was that it was part of Unibet first.
Okay.
Unibet saw that it's going to be extremely difficult to compete with Bet365 that had so much revenue. So they basically found that in order to compete on sports betting, we need to share the development costs because it's quite expensive and very sort of labor and compute intensive to work with sports betting. Right. So they created Kambi instead. So Unibet was like obviously the first customer, and then it was multiple other ones. Like I think now ATG, for example, is one of the more not more recent, but they joined the platform when Sweden was deregulating the betting market.
Okay, so but did you provide the user interface as well? You said, or
yes, in different layers, either fully managed, where you basically could like theme it into your colors, and then it was the same. Right. But also with some customization things, or also SDKs and APIs. So you can basically like select how much you want to customize that. If you want to go fully turnkey solution, or if you want to sort of customize it in different ways.
But you still hosted the service, or could they actually take that like in an open source fashion and with the SDKs run it and host it themselves? Or
if they built front end components, I guess they hosted that themselves. But like the back end and infrastructure was centralized.
Yeah. Okay. And you ran on some cloud, or was it
on-prem?
On-prem. Why is that, do you think?
Compliance and regulatory reasons.
Right.
I know that now that I've heard that they've gone partly cloud at least. I think at least for the data analytics stack. I'm not fully updated. I had lunch with our data architect a few months back.
Interesting. Okay, cool. And perhaps you can mention also a bit about the tech stack that Kambi was making use of. I guess it has to be a lot of real-time stuff there, right?
Yes. It was a lot of real-time, but it was... At my time, it was very much a point-to-point. So we had one data initiative where we looked at going with Kafka and Hadoop as well. So I didn't see that through, but that was the plan. But at this time, we had basically a data warehouse on Vertica, and then I think, Pentaho as a BI interface at that time, which was a bit slow, didn't really scale. So we did some changes.
Vertica, isn't that like super expensive as well?
Don't know. I wasn't involved in those decisions. But I think they're still running Vertica in the cloud. I know they like it and find it really performant and functioning well. Mm-hmm. But that's probably in that case a person I should nominate for another call. I was purely on the analytics team there.
Right. And what did the analytics team do?
We did lots of things. We had not too much of reporting that was done in the data team. We were doing a lot of data analytics primarily for different ways. So we had a centralized team where we had a couple of data scientists, and we had analysts that were deployed into various parts of the product. So we had analysts working with understanding front end and client behavior, user behavior. We had a team in London as well that were doing more of the sort of sports book, like trying to figure out what happened in this football game between these minutes in the match.
Mm-hmm. After the fact or in real time?
No, after the fact. We had a lot of real time things as well for like detecting arbitrage.
Right.
I mean, it's a super data driven business, which is also, I think, why I found it a good school, a good way to sort of learn the ropes, because you need to do a lot of decisions in real time that are analytically involved.
And I guess impossible for a human to do.
Yeah. Right? Totally impossible. So, I mean, just calculating odds in a live betting scenario is, we didn't use machine learning, but we had a quant team that were running stats algorithms, just counting the probabilities of everything and then updating with the new state, recalculating. So it's quite interesting. And it's like the whole business is about getting your probabilities right. If you do that, you have a place. If you get your probabilities wrong, you're out of the business, more or less. So it's a lot of focus on trying to capture things as they happen, but also understanding them afterwards and learning from them. So a lot of the things we found, we could feed back to like the quant team and give feedback to different traders and things like that.
Cool. Awesome. And should we move to Nordnet perhaps? What made you still take the jump to Nordnet?
It was a couple of things. It was, I don't know, sort of an interesting business to go into. I think I've never been particularly fond of finance as a domain. I'm not really interested. And I find it also a bit like sports betting, that you sort of have to be a bit of a nerd to get the value out of it. You're sort of served with a million options, and then you have to figure out what's the right way to approach it. So I think it was, they were bought from by Nordic Capital and taken off the stock market to try to rebuild the company, focusing on data, AI, and user experience. So it was quite an interesting setup, where it was really going into scaling the analytics and data science team really quickly, and try to get value out and support the business with creating new products like RoboSave, an algorithmic sort of
RoboSave.
fund.
So that's is it for stocks or for funds or what?
For funds? It's basically an auto trading fund, like Avanza has as well.
Yeah. Awesome. And I'm trying to see the time is flying away here a bit as well. So trying to move a bit quickly ahead. And anything that you'd like to share, or some main highlights from your time in Nordnet that you'd like to share?
I don't know. I think it was challenging. I think we had, I don't know if we did some recommendation systems, but then it was a bit sort of trying to find the path of how to build things. So what I think happened was, first I sort of left for like personal reasons, but we delivered some recommendation systems. We started to go with some sort of data-driven CRM campaigns that actually created some values. But then it was realization that we had to like rebuild the architecture and prioritize certain things. So it was, I think, the right decision for the company, but it sort of postponed the data journey a bit.
Awesome. And then you move into another very interesting company as well, Epidemic Sound.
Yes.
Right. Can you just quickly elaborate? What does Epidemic Sound do?
Epidemic Sound provides and sells access to royalty-free music, more or less. So basically, if you want to use music for something, they have the tool for it. And I think the premise was parts of the founders were coming from the TV industry, where they found that producing TV shows like Solsidan, I think, is the creation of those guys. It's easy until you come to putting sound and music on top of it, because then you get to deal with a lot of lawyers. You have to pay extensive amounts of money to do it, and basically a big hassle. So that was like the problem definition from that perspective. The other was that it's sort of music industry income is not like fairly distributed. It's very centralized around the big artists from the record labels, and somehow diluted by a lot of collecting agencies and royalty holders and lawyers and stuff. Yeah. So the other founders came from the music industry, where they wanted to allow for a way for musicians to make a living from their music. So they started that, and basically the whole company is like more of sort of a platform company where it's curating somehow like Netflix. So they buy music from musicians. They buy also the license, pay for it up front, and then they sell the licenses to TV broadcasters.
It's one of the biggest like provider of audio for YouTube videos as well.
I heard someone mentioning internally that around 20% of YouTube is Epidemic Sound music, which is enormous.
It's enormous, and I think it is one of the biggest.
I think it is the biggest, at least for that type of quality music.
Did you do that because you have a personal interest in music as well yourself, or?
Partly. It's music is a very positive thing. It's like coming from the betting industry, where people have a lot of mixed opinions and feelings. I mean, nobody dislikes music, so it's like a very positive thing to work with. And also, I found it really an interesting company to go into. The business model is amazing. It was scaling extremely fast. It was a chance to build up a new team from scratch, and basically apply sort of all learnings on a blank slate and really build it up. So super fun.
Yeah, can imagine.
And scaling fast. I mean, it became the latest unicorn last year, I think.
Oh, they are a unicorn now.
Yeah. Okay.
So $1 billion worth.
Yes.
And how many employees do you think they have right now?
I think 500 I think 400 or 500 now. I think when I joined it was like 150. So we sort of outgrew our office, had to move to another one.
Still in Södermalm, or?
Fatbybrunn right now.
Oh, nice. Södermalm is nice.
It is.
Awesome. And then you took a big leap suddenly, and you created your own company, right? Or was this something that already existed when you moved to Data Age?
It already existed. I was sort of invited to join quite early, but then I felt that Epidemic Sound would be a good experience to do. But then I joined in October last year, which is I don't know. I wanted to do something different. Going into another head of analytics job felt like not that challenging, or I mean, of course, it's challenging, but not in the same way that I wanted. So having my own company or sort of being a bit more independent and trying those wings have been sort of a dream since I was a kid. I always said that I would have my own company when I get old, and I guess I'm old, so it was time.
We're all still 27, I think.
Mentally.
Yes, mentally. Okay, quickly describe what is Data Age and what is their speciality potentially.
Yes. We have, I think we're based on like our situational awareness was basically, I mean, first of all, there is a lot of value in working with data. It's proven over and over in many places. So that's the first one. The second one is that we see also supported by a lot of like academic studies and so on, that a lot of companies are investing heavily into data and analytics and AI. However, quite few of companies say that they are successfully becoming data-driven or establishing a data-driven culture. So there is a bit of a gap there. And that is what we try to focus on. And sort of our experience and my experience has been that there is a gap in the market. There are a lot of management consultancies that, I mean, some of them are quite good at this, but it's not really the main core business. And on the other hand, there is a lot of companies providing tech services like data or analytics. But there is a gap between those two, which was also the realization at Connecta, where we had a management consulting team delivering PowerPoints. And then it was up to the customer to figure out how do we make this happen for real. So that is basically what we want to do, to have part of the company. I mean, there is a strong management consulting background to really understand the business sense of things.
In Data Age, you mean?
Yeah. But we also have like really strong competences in analytics and data science and in data as well. So we think that with those abilities to have the data in place, have the understanding and the analytics in place, but also figuring out how to act on it and how to actually create value from it. That is what we try to do.
But it's not a private company; it's mainly a consultancy company, or
pure consultancy right now. I mean, we will say it's something that is on the table, maybe, but also I think we try to right now be very agnostic from platforms, so we don't have any technical partnerships or anything like that. To just be able to say with like high integrity what is best for the client right now.
How many people are working at Data Age right now?
Right now we're 10, and we have one person coming in, so 11 right now.
Cool.
So we were growing from 5 to 10 last year, and hopefully we can continue growing this year as well.
And I know you've been working with a lot of very well-known companies as well at that time already, like Spotify and Volt, etc. Anything that we shouldn't go through everything, but is there some part of those that you would like to focus on, or give some example of what you have worked with while at Data Age?
That's one benefit of being a consultant as well. You get to try out different things. So
your diversity and breadth of knowledge there, I think, is far few people have the same kind of understanding in a more holistic sense, I think.
No, but I think that's, of course, what I see as my strength as well. Then on the individual parts, there are experts that are much better, but I have a fairly good holistic perspective.
Yeah, I think so.
So I've been doing everything from head of data for Trustly, then head of product insights for Spotify and the Soundtrap team, and now head of analytics for Fishbrain, which is also with my former boss from Epidemic, who's going in there. And more just strategic advisory for Volt, in one of the companies in Equity Ventures portfolio. So it's quite fun to be able to work on different levels, from very strategic matters to hands-on things to a sense.
If you still were to try to mention some examples, some highlights, something perhaps that made you a bit surprised when you started working with some company of those that you worked with, anything that you can think of, this was a bit surprising from a positive or negative point of view?
I would say one realization that I've made, at least with quite a red thread the last few years, is that I've been working with scale-ups quite a lot. And I think it's quite interesting how similar the maturity journeys are. Most companies follow like the same pattern pretty much from the startup phase to the scale-up phase to more mature phase and sort of becoming data-driven. I find that quite interesting and somehow rewarding, even though the business models can differ and the environments can differ. It's surprisingly similar.
Okay, but let's try to elaborate a bit more on that. So given your experience in a number of companies, what is that journey like? You know, how do you become more data-driven? Can you just give some kind of, I guess, best practices in how to take that journey in the right way?
Yes, I can give it a try. But I think, starting out, I would say, as we touched on at the beginning of the talk, like having a centralized setup where you focus on getting the basics in place, just getting the data in from the right sources, sort of trying to get an understanding of what actually matters and what's important. Basically from getting the basic reports in place to understanding your metrics and like defining the outcomes that is relevant. Then I think that like the first thing, splitting up data into tech and keeping BI or analytics, going later into a hybrid model when you get too much of a disconnect between the central team and you start losing context of what's happening in the business. And I think it's like, as you mentioned yourself, like there are two generic ways to approach a scaling problem. Either you can apply like command and control to take more decisions top down, or you need to... When
you say command and control, I'm thinking about completely different things these days, but okay, please.
Yeah, maybe we should keep it at that.
That's a fact.
No, but I think it's not a scalable way. It's a way to sort of force alignment, but it probably doesn't work also, I guess, in real life. So finding a way to align with like having clear understanding of where we're heading and like how to align the teams. And I think that's normal. I think it's both Epidemic and Spotify, that became quite clear. I mean, we had a clear idea about what was important, like what is the most important metric.
So the understanding of being data-driven and the values for doing so was clear, you would say, for those companies as well?
I think it became clear. It's of course an ongoing work, but understanding what are the outcomes that you're aiming at, I think is really important. And I think that's a bit of a divider, I think, which is also supported in literature, that there is often a gap between the top management of a company that wants to have some kind of impact, often measured in financial terms. And the rest of the company is managed on like resources, people or money, activities or output. And there is a disconnect between producing something and creating value. And I think there is somehow an assumption that as long as we build things, we create value. And I think that is not necessarily true. And I think a lot of support also from literature states that maybe 60% of what a product team does is waste. So assuming value is very dangerous, I think. So I think it's good to be informed, take informed bets, because you need to deal with uncertainty. You can never go away from uncertainty because then sort of you have to do nothing. But also trying to prove, I mean, even if you take a decision based on assumption, you can still measure the impact in clear terms and try to connect that.
But then becoming data-driven means so many different things, I think. And some people think data-driven just means BI, like, trying to have the proper understanding of the business itself to make, some decision on what to continue with. But it can also be more product driven, I guess. So you actually start using it for the products you're building, or it can be for the manufacturing if you have that, or the marketing or the sales and whatnot. What do you think the right way to do this? If we speak about the data journey in general, is it correct to start with the BI journey to make sure that you first have like a data-driven way to understand how the business is going, or should you start also with the products or with the sales and marketing or manufacturing or whatnot, logistics and so many things?
I think that, you can do both, but you can do both in the sense that you don't have to like start with BI for the whole company. You can in a vertical go from nothing to maturing quite quickly, and the rest of the company can still stay behind. I think that's valid, but I don't think you can start with. And I think, it's a big problem. A machine learning model or like an AI solution often tries to optimize towards some kind of parameter. If that parameter is not aligned with the outcomes that you want, you risk sort of automating yourself into the wrong direction.
Right.
So I think having a good notion of what are the key success factors and how do you measure them is very important to be able to go advanced.
Right.
So, I don't know what your perspective is. Of course, there are some more AI things that solves other problems.
Something that we speak a bit about here is the so-called analytical ladder, which means that some people claim that you need to do the full BI journey before you even move into more advanced analytics, or you start using data or AI for some product. And potentially that can be a bit dangerous if you need to take, if you wait with using data and AI for other things than AI until you have, everything perfectly working for the BI reporting kind of things.
I agree.
And, moving stuff centrally, if you take some kind of logging of the data that you have from whatever product or from the sales or from whatever part of the organization is good, of course, but it is actually quite a lot of work to get like a centralized like pipelines of all the data to have the proper KPIs that you mentioned for the business reporting purpose. And sometimes to include something in a product can be completely separate from that kind of centralized BI reporting pipeline, and not even the same kind of logging or data that you're using. So one example that we spoke about from Peltorium was this kind of manufacturing company, and they had the product team for some kind of machine that did some floor grinding kind of things, and they just want to think for predictive maintenance kind of purposes. We want to understand when it's breaking, and you can, as a domain expert, understand very quickly that when I just hear the machine sounding a bit strange, as a human, as an expert, that now it's time to do some service, otherwise it will break down.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, and you can simply put a mic on it and collect some data and do some annotation and build a system or some AI model on that, and you can have some predictive maintenance, rather quickly. And that has nothing to do with the BI like pipelines, right? So I think at least that's one of the things that we've spoken a bit about. BI is super useful, of course, but don't mistake that you have to do the full BI journey at least to start using data and AI for other things.
No,
do you agree?
I agree. I think there is also. I tend to read quite a lot. One thing that I think was like 2014 or something, that an MIT study basically like plotted like two journeys to being data driven. That one that they call the generalized path, which is very much starting with the BI layer, adding some diagnostics on top, maybe some predictive, and then sort of going up the ladder. And a specialized path where you can go in verticals and go very deep,
right,
while some other things might be lagging behind because it can, or because you just have to run fast. So we applied that when we set the strategy at Svenska Spel, where we found that some areas we need to be able to go more advanced. For example, marketing was way ahead of many of the other functions, because they were higher maturity and more business value to be derived. So I very much think so as well, that there is not like one way of doing it. But I think you need to be quite clear with that the model you apply, do you have the context for it? And do you know that what you're optimizing for is actually a meaningful metric?
Right. Yeah, optimizing for the wrong metric, that can be super dangerous.
And I think it happens quite a lot, and it's high risk even if you do a lot of BI and analytics, because it's hard, and the metric to optimize for is moving around as well, because it's not like a stable thing over time.
Yeah. And also I remember some discussions that, if you do an A/B test, that I'm sure you've done so much during your years as well. But sometimes, the data you use for doing that A/B test is perhaps flawed. It could be noisy. It could be that actually measure the wrong thing for the A/B test.
Yeah.
And one term, or some terms we have used is, data only versus data first. And what we meant with that was, if you're data only, you only trust the data.
Yeah.
So if the A/B test says something, you don't even question it. You don't even think about, is it because we are logging the wrong thing? Is some of the data missing? Is it noise in there? Is it some bug somewhere that will be causing this? And you just say, data says that, we don't care about anything else. And that's potentially super dangerous then. So data first means, of course, you want to then look at the data, but then you need to take the human into place to actually try to analyze, what does this really mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
No, but I think at Kambi we were very deliberate to call it data informed, because data is one point for the decision making, and there are many other data points that you need to consider, not only like quant data. I mean, at Spotify we had in the product insights team, we had also a lot of user researchers. Or a lot, but we had user researchers as well to get also, because data will probably not give you the explanation of why a user acts in a certain way. It's only sort of that it does and to what extent. But the motivations or the actual problems you solve, I mean, don't forget to talk to the users. It's like, we had a discussion in a customer meeting today that it seems that analog companies are a bit reluctant to sort of look at the data because they're used to talking to the users. And I think as a tech company, it might be also dangerous to just look at the data instead of actually meeting and talking to users. I think that's super important as well.
Yeah.
So data-driven can be very dangerous and can lead to, like, as we discussed when we met last time as well, with local optimizations.
Exactly. I mean, I guess balance is the solution to so many things. Going hybrid, both in terms of the organization, in terms of how you interpret or make decisions from data.
Yeah.
Right. And I think in general, just, if you think AI versus machines, if you want to go that route, I think that the best thing is to have a hybrid there as well.
Yeah.
You should be data-driven, but perhaps not fully automated for at least some more advanced things. If it's super simple thing like a recommender system, which not always is simple, but at least that's something that could be potentially fully automated. But for so many other tasks, it's just, one source of information that augments the understanding from the human, and then the human has to do what they are good at. And if you combine the two in a hybrid way, that potentially is the best way to go.
Yeah.
Would you say so?
Yeah, definitely. We talked about that quite a lot at Kambi, where, I mean, you can, of course, I mean, a machine learning model will probably give you some probabilities of it being right. I mean, how sure it is. I mean, you can let it decide up to a certain threshold, and then you can add a human interface on top for the specific cases, or the ones with most or least signal. I mean, it's all about trying to, I think, be like focused on like the situation you're at, the context, and the impact of things as well. I know we had a lot of talks in the management team at Soundtrap about like type 1 and type 2 decisions.
Okay, like, move to that. We have to continue that discussion. Okay, cool. But okay, what did you mean with type 1 and type 2 decisions at that time?
I mean, it's a Jeff Bezos thing from Amazon, I think, from the beginning. Basically, is the decision easy to revert if it fails, or is it really permanent and so on? I mean, depending on if it's something that is very easy to change. I mean, if you do like change an interface, you run an A/B test, it doesn't work out, then you can just revert. It's like no consequence, more or less. But if you take like a big pricing change, for example, that might be much more difficult to revert. So you need to pay much more attention up front. So I think finding the balance of like, what are the consequences? And I mean, that also goes back to sort of product management and like Silicon Valley product group things like Inspired and those books from Marty Kagan with validating the product risks before you do something and taking informed decisions where I've actually looked at the problems and understood them, fed it into the context, and also like the probability and consequence of something happening. I would say is the thing to do. So what we have tried in many ways is to try to enforce that into like business reviews, like what is the data right now? What kind of conclusions do you draw from that? And like, does that change? Like the DIB framework that you talked to Henrik Landgren about.
Yes.
How do you update your worldview based on the sort of situation now and the data you have? And then looking at, okay, based on that, how do you assume, or sort of how do you analyze and decide what you think is the right way the right thing to do right now?
And just to let people know, the DIB framework is basically the data, insights, and beliefs. So you like refine the data from the raw data you have into some set of insights, and then you frame some beliefs in how to make a decision. And
the bets.
Yes,
the last
bets
bit
as well.
And I think that was a big learning from sports betting, and I tend to sort of go back to that. I mean, if I would bet something against you, if we were talking about AI, I wouldn't be very confident in my chances that I would win. So I would have a very low probability of winning, meaning I probably shouldn't set a bet that is that high. But if we were talking about, I don't know, schools in Älmhult, then maybe I could think that, maybe I have an edge on that. So I can go bet bigger. And I think that's sort of valuing like the stakes you put in versus the probability of success.
This game theoretic kind of thinking.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that is very much what decision-making boils down to. And also, I think you just need to avoid like analysis paralysis as well, because you will never have all the facts. So you need to deal with uncertainty.
Yes.
I think being too risk averse is also a very dangerous thing, which is also something that sort of, I think it's the case also for companies just starting out. They tend to want reports on everything, and then they don't really know what's important.
What do you think about like a Facebook comment like "move fast and break things"? And let me just perhaps put that in a more context. I mean, you can think about the old style kind of waterfall planning, thinking ahead like a couple of months before you even start working with something. That is, very safe, low risk, and you have considered all the contingencies that you can think of. But on the other side, it will be moving very slowly. On the other hand, if you move too fast without doing any kind of thinking, you get a lot of stuff out potentially in a product, but you will breaking things all the time, and you have to revert all the things all the time. So the value will still be slow. So the value that you provide for the company will be slow in both extremes, like either you move too fast or too slow. What do you think about this? Is this basically this kind of game theoretic thinking you're thinking about in finding the right balance of taking risks sometimes to make a change?
I definitely think so. I'm probably tilting towards run fast and break things myself. I think that's how I'm geared. But also at the same time, you need to evaluate the risks and also the type 1 or type 2. Like, can I revert it? What happens if I'm wrong?
Right.
And like, what is the consequence in relation to the likelihood somehow? But I think it's super important. And I think, I don't know, this is my pure theory. I think we are risk averse. I mean, we are risk averse as human beings. I mean, that's also a scientific fact. Yes. We rather not lose 100 crowns than winning 100 crowns. Losing sort of hurts more. That's like a sort of biological fact. But also I think a cultural trait is, I think we don't deal with failure very well in Sweden.
Right. Yeah.
Is my theory.
And a lot of companies perhaps don't have this kind of forgiving kind of culture either.
Yeah, maybe. But I think that's definitely a case where we're sort of expected to be right all the time. But that's just, I mean, to be fair, it's a fallacy. It's just an imaginary world, because we all make mistakes all the time.
Right.
It's just like, how big are they? How do we handle it? Do we learn from it, or do we try to hide it?
Yeah.
And I think having a culture where you focus on the problem rather than assigning blame, I think is super important, because a realization when you start running A/B tests, for example, is that you get black on white that most of the stuff you do is probably fail.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't add value. And that realization can be quite hard if you feel like, oh, that's hurting.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was right.
If you're making a bet still that you think this is going to be an improvement, but then it turns
exactly.
out
I mean, if you say that, my probability of being right is 25%, but the upside is enormous, then maybe it's worth the risk of failing. So I think that is critical part. And I'm sort of very passionate in like trying to get that as right as you can.
I think sometimes you should even have a KPI. The person that admits to being wrong the most should have a higher salary.
Yeah, it's
really
yes.
I think you will have a future guest in Mikhail Shilkin here.
Oh yeah.
He told me he was a data scientist, worked with at Kambi. And he told me one thing that really stuck, that his job as data scientist is to prove people wrong.
Oh.
Because that's the valuable outcome of his work.
Yeah.
Because if you're right, everyone will know about it.
Yeah.
You will have built a feature, it will be celebrated, it will be right. But if you do something wrong and hide it, it's very likely that it will happen again by someone else. So learning from failure, and like as Spotify, I guess, celebrating failure a bit is. Yeah, I think it's really failures.
It's actually
it's really important, just not to create a nice culture, but it actually adds a lot of value. Admitting, noticing, and learning from failures.
It adds value, but also I think it removes the whole, the scary part of admitting failure, which is so dangerous, because then people start to fake success instead.
Yeah, it's super dangerous. Success theaters is like really an anti-pattern for being data-driven, I would say.
I think that we need to put a very, very fat line between different, what is called work positions, where you can be actually rewarded if you do wrong. So what if a fireman does something wrong?
But yeah,
so maybe we should limit it to
type
research.
1 and type 2. I mean, it's hard to.
And it's innovation and research. It cannot be, or a politician making a wrong move, which
or like a surgeon, making.
Or a surgeon, right? So it cannot be the person that actually fails the most gets most rewarded. In a research, maybe, or not in a research. But innovation in this context.
I think even a surgeon can admit to a lot of mistakes, as long as not like type 2 kind of things, or these things that can't be reverted.
All right. Okay. So let's make it then for type 2. You should be rewarded, but not for the type 1.
Which one is which, by the way? The type 2 is the permanent thing, right?
Type 2 is I just Googled it actually. Good. So it was like this. Type 2 decisions are type 2 decisions are like walking through a door.
Okay.
If you don't like the decision, you can walk away.
Okay. Yeah. So it's type 1 that's the permanent
thing. Type 1 is the permanent one.
Yes. Okay.
But I think it's super, super important, and just sort of, I don't know. It's also one of the benefits being like involved in analytics, because you're sort of, it's part of your job to be very fact oriented and just state things as they are. Yeah. It's sometimes always not valued that you state things as they are, but I think it's really important.
And me personally, if I hear someone say, I was wrong, this adds so much, credibility for me. I remember one person at Spotify called Adam Kava. I'm
working with him now.
You are?
Yeah, I'm working with his company at Volt. So I'm involved there.
What's get them fast? What is it called?
Getting data.
Getting data, right? Of course.
So I'm going to Warsaw next week to meet up with those guys.
I mean, he made this kind of awesome talks, and he said, I did so many mistakes. Oh, that was so wrong. Oh, that was so horrible. And when a person goes on stage and say that, it adds so much credibility. And I wish people understood that this is actually how you should speak and think. And if everyone were doing that, you would have a culture where I think people would be so much more productive in a good sense, so to speak.
I definitely think so. I actually listened to, I don't think it was Adam, but it was some colleagues from him when he was at Spotify. I think it was like Hadoop Summit in Brussels, like, I don't know, 2012 or 2013. Yeah. They were standing holding a presentation about sort of how they killed the whole cluster at Spotify when the board was having a visit. So sort of, we fucked up. Well. It's like, we learned from it, we implemented things, and it's, for me, it's very refreshing because, as you say, I mean, people make mistakes all the time. So that's how we learn, right?
I think a person that does no mistake is doing two things wrong, or one of two things wrong.
Yeah.
Either they're playing super safe all the time, or they're hiding stuff.
Exactly.
And neither is good.
Exactly.
Right. Cool. And I see the time, but you spoke about type 1 and 2, and I first thought you meant something else. So I'd like to move to that something else.
I see where you're going, I think.
So this is more the Kahneman kind of thinking fast and slow kind of things, and moving more into, I guess, the difference between, what human and the human brain is and what AI systems are. And let me just elaborate a bit more and see what you agree with and potentially does not agree with. And I think we can all easily agree, at least, with that the type of AI that we have today is super narrow.
Sorry.
And it's trained to do very specific things. And the human brain is much more general. Agree so far, right?
Yes.
And, we can also say that AI is actually better than humans in a number of tasks, like, of course, playing chess and, doing perhaps some image classification, or even, some understanding text in some way actually can be better for some very specific tasks already today. Yes. So AI is certainly bad at some things. One thing is being able to have a more general kind of understanding and reasoning capability. But then I think I would also like to say that humans are bad at some stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't hear people saying that enough. And I get really annoyed when someone claims that the goal for AI should be to have human level intelligence.
Yeah.
Because humans are really stupid sometimes. Humans are really bad at some tasks. It's very easy to see. I mean, try to ask anyone to try to multiply two large numbers. Try to have any human trying to memorize, 20 things and remember it. A computer can do that so easily. So we have to recognize that humans are really, really bad at some stuff. AI is really, really bad at some stuff. And I think it's better to focus on what they are bad at. And then if we say that, then we can say that, okay, let's say that AI is probably really good at going through large amount of data in some way. It can be large, like time series data for some sports betting kind of purpose, or it can be like a huge amount of images in some hours of video that you want to find some kind of thing that's happening, or thousands of pages of text. And for humans, it would take a huge time to do so. But for an AI system, it can do it in a fraction of a second. But they don't really have the deep understanding of it. Yep. They don't have the general kind of knowledge and the reasoning capability to be able to understand what it means. But it can find it in a superficial way really quickly. So, now, okay, after that rant, would you agree, for one, that there is a big difference between the human brain, what they are good and bad at, and an AI, and potentially what we should really seek if we want today to find a value from data and AI is to find the examples where humans are bad at something, try to automate that part in a semi-potentially automatic way, then have humans coming in, helping out with the part that they are good at, and having a hybrid, as we said a number of times now, solution for that. Right?
Yes, I agree 100%. And I mean, there are many layers of that, from problems to solve all the way to, I think, existential questions like the singularity and so on. That's I find quite interesting. I mean, looking from a really high existential position. Yeah. I mean, you can argue that are we doing good or not as a species? So I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I think there's humans are severely flawed in many ways, and I think we need to accept that and try to remedy it and use the tools that helps us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should spend more time building AI that are good at things that humans are not good at. And I think it's really weird that so many people are saying that we should build AI that can reach human level intelligence. I think that's completely the wrong way to go.
Yeah, exactly. It's the wrong framing of the problem.
Yeah. We should use AI to be a complement to humans, right?
Yeah.
But then you spoke about singularity, and since we're moving a bit towards the end, perhaps we can move into a more speculative, philosophical kind of set of topics then, and AGI kind of things, general intelligence that we may reach at some point, and it may be a singularity when we have lost the control in some way and things are moving ahead quicker than we think. But okay, so we spoke about human level intelligence potentially being a bad way to at least guide the development of AI. Right, but do you have any favorite definition or things? How would you say that this is the right direction of where we should spend time improving the intelligent level of AI systems? Yeah, perhaps not a perfect definition, but what is the right thing to make sure that we spend time in research and in companies to improve the value for AI?
I mean, first of all, I agree very much with we need to evaluate what activities and what work is adding value in as opposed to letting a machine do it. So I mean, repetitive tasks that are fairly straightforward and simple at scale. I mean, we shouldn't do that. That's just a waste. Rather focusing on the very complex things where we need to connect dots and stuff like that is harder for a machine learning model or an AI application to do. I mean, if we could do that would be a massive productivity boon of everything. It will, however, sort of have societal consequences that I think we need to be prepared for and act on. But also, I think, I mean, we're talking a lot about the problem with AI and machine learning being biased based on what the data we feed, but also all those biases are coming from us humans. So I think if we can, I saw you posted about what is the optimal tax rate, for example, those kind of decisions, what is best for the population. I think that concerns me quite a lot in the world today that is so polarized and there are so many
non-data driven.
Exactly.
But I mean, super important societal questions.
And I saw that also that you talked with Henrik Landgren. If you can't agree on the facts, I mean, it's impossible to have a discussion about what's the best course of action. Right. And I think if we can use AI for those things, I think that would be highly valuable for humanity. I think because we are not. I mean, there are so many flaws in humans, like greed and stuff like that. Now I'm getting sort of really political, I guess, and philosophical. But I think...
I mean, if you take the tax example, as you mentioned, I mean, people can't really think... I mean, humans, at least, is very anecdotal in the way they're thinking. If you want to do some kind of simulation with, 1 million people doing a set of action 1,000 times and then seeing, what the change in the tax rate will have as an effect on it, there is no way that the human can do that, I would argue. The only way you can do that is by having some kind of data-driven approach for it.
Definitely. And I mean, there are also, I think we discussed that last time we met as well, economical theory as well, that I think based on the political spectrum in Sweden, I think the sort of left wing tend to go with higher taxes are always better, and the right wing tends to go with lower taxes always better. Yeah. But the truth and the theory is somewhere in between. There is like a theoretical optimal tax rate.
It's a hybrid. It's
always
a hybrid.
But I mean, if you go with ideology and beliefs instead of facts, then it will always be a biased discussion, and it's like more of a rhetorical way, like debate about who sort of takes the decision in the end.
Yeah,
I mean, there is an optimal tax rate everywhere that gives the most money per capita to the state.
Yes.
Then you can have discussions about, okay, how do we distribute that money from that state to what should we fund?
So equality should be another objective, I guess. So I mean, productivity and the equality and productivity, I think in that case was the two objectives, that they want to balance.
Yeah.
And if you don't balance them, the productivity will still be suffering in the end. Because people will be really upset, and it will cause some kind of,
Yeah, but exactly. But I mean, it's like called a Laffer curve. I think it's like if you have zero tax rate, you will have zero income for the state.
Yes, exactly.
If you have 100% tax rate, no one would work.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Those extremes is quite easy to understand.
Yeah, it's that simple. Okay, so let me test you on another thing. It's just a theory of mine, but there are differences between the human brain and AI, of course. And we can take the obvious thing. I would say it's like 4 or 5 different main things. And let me see which one you agree with here. I think one is obviously generality, that the human type of brain is much general. It can handle so many more tasks than an AI system can today. But of course, we see all the latest type of models that we have in AI starting to be more and more multitask and multimodal and multilingual, and it's starting to become more general, but still very, very far from the level of generality that that humans have. So obviously that's one part, right? No, I guess you're not arguing so far.
No.
The other, I would potentially say, is reasoning. And then, I think people also sometimes speak a bit about this in the wrong way. I think, we have so many examples of systems that do reason in some way. You can even take a chess playing AI system. It does some reasoning, thinking, if we do that action, what happens then? We retrack, we backtrace, we try to find the best set of actions in like a rational reasoning kind of way. But it's not high level reasoning. It's not thinking of objects in a high abstraction level. Like this is an object. This is if I were to hit a head on or hit your head with a hammer, it will cause some kind of effect in a high level reasoning kind of way. And that type of reasoning we don't have, at least I would argue as well.
Yeah, I probably agree. I agree.
Yeah. And I want to take the self-driving car example just to make this a bit more concrete soon. But let me just continue. So the second thing is potentially plasticity. And what I mean with this is that the AI systems we have today is that they have a data-driven approach when it comes to learning the weights of it. So instead of manually programming all the rules, you just feed data and it learns the weights. But the architecture for that network that we have is very manually designed.
Yes.
Or potentially you have neural architectural search, but that requires so much data to be trained, so it's not very plastic, basically. The human brain, on the other side, it can change and rewire itself surprisingly efficiently. So even if you have some kind of stroke, you can quickly rewire the brain to handle things in areas of the brain that didn't even do that before. So it's surprisingly plastic. And that's certainly not the case, I would argue, with AI systems today. And the last thing, I'm speaking too much. Okay, this is the last thing. The other thing is, we are so like batch oriented today. So instead of, the human brain is both changing the weights and making inference at the same time. Whereas AI systems is very much, you first train the thing, then you make a lot of inference, potentially you retrain or, improve it a bit, but it's not done in an online fashion, which the brain is. And I'm very hopeful for like the neuromorphic kind of computing, which actually moves these things together. Right. Have you heard about the neuromorphic architecture?
I haven't actually.
Okay.
So you have to tell me about that later.
Yeah. We can take that after work then later. Yeah. But I think these are the 4 things I would argue that this, at least to me, some of the top differentiating factors, generality, high-level reasoning, plasticity, and online learning of the system as well. Do you think anything is missing? Would you agree with those 4? Anything missing from those when it comes to what the difference is between humans and AI?
No, I would agree with all of them. Maybe a bit sort of the plasticity is not my key domain, so I trust you on that. Yeah. But I think it's I forget the name. What's the author that wrote Life 3.0?
Oh, Max Tegmark.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that's quite an interesting thing. We can learn, but we cannot change our hardware.
Yeah, right.
An AI could potentially do that. To an extent, that's if we figure that out.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is also maybe the part that scares people, I guess. No, but I agree with your premises.
And also, if we just make it a bit concrete, like everyone is speaking about self-driving cars now and Tesla autopilot and whatnot. Would you be if you take a car, the latest type of Tesla autopilot, I think it's up to version 10.2 or something now. Would you be comfortable having your hands tied, not being able to steer the wheel, and just let the car drive you around in Stockholm today?
No, not right now. Yeah. But then again, I wouldn't know how good it is because I haven't sort of studied on it. But of course, I guess you're referring to, does it have to be perfect? Yeah. Are we perfect? Like, is it still an improvement or is it the worst driving experience?
Or compare it to sitting in a cab with a cab driver that's human.
Exactly.
That could be drunk or very tired or, playing with his mobile phone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Which one would you trust the most? I agree with you. I would still trust the human drivers more today. But do you think, if you were to make an estimate, when you think the self-driving car would be an improvement to the average cab driver, can you give some kind of, what's your thinking there? When will AI be better than the average cab driver?
It depends. I think there is a bit of a disconnect between feeling secure and being rational in that case. The break point is probably, from a rational perspective, probably lower than what we think. Because I guess I'm probably also biased in that way. I sort of tend to trust myself when I'm driving quite a lot. Not because I'm the best driver ever, but at least I believe I have a fairly good take on what my limits and boundaries are, so I can sort of adapt. That's my belief. It's probably not like a way to prove that. Yeah. But trusting someone else, even to let you drive. It would probably, you're probably the best driver ever, but it's. It would still be a bit of an uncertainty. Yeah. So I think it's a very interesting question, and I don't think I have a clear answer. But from a societal perspective, we're probably already now at the point where we should ban human driving, I guess.
Soon, at least. I'm not quite sure we're there yet, but
because at least a machine will not fall asleep. Yeah. The machine will never be drunk. Yeah. The machine will be probably quite predictable, I guess, in how it drives. So, there are a lot of things.
Over safe as well. It's rather stop, than being, it's very safe, much more safe than sorry, so to speak.
Exactly. But it's like the coexistence then between drivers that can be totally irrational and machines to be able to adapt to human irrationality. Maybe that's like the problem.
And also a lot of bugs that could occur, in a software that we probably can't trust that much.
Blue screen.
Yeah, exactly. That would be, you can't even take the wheel or brake anymore. That would be kind of scary. Cool stuff. Okay. Let me see here for some potential final questions. We spoke a bit about singularity, but I think we already covered that. If we just try to end a bit with, a more forward-looking kind of question, and I'm eager to go in a certain direction, but I'm biting my tongue a bit here. But AI can be used and abused for a lot of things. It's happening a lot in the world these days, and we can easily imagine at least AI being used for bad things that could hurt humans and society. But it could also be used for a lot of positive things like climate change or whatnot, or medical care, and who knows. What is your thinking here? Are you afraid of AI being abused for malicious purposes more than you're hopeful that it will be used for good purposes?
I think that it will be mostly positive. But there are, of course, malign ways to use AI and ML. But it's not, the technology is not evil by itself. It's humans that use it for bad purposes. So I mean, again, it's but I think, I mean, looking at what concerns me very much is how do we teach ourselves to be like source critical and today I think, I mean, I forced my son to watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix the other week because I think it's like, I mean, he's obviously a big TikTok user and YouTube users, and he needs to be trained that you need to be critical of everything there because it might be fake, it might be a real thing. Right. So you need to look for like other sources. And I think people today, it's quite clear that we don't really have the mental tools or the training or whatever necessary to really function in the information society that we have today. And I think that leads to a lot of bad consequences that we see right now and what we've seen during like elections in the US and stuff like that. And that scares me a bit. But I think in general, I mean, looking at least, I've heard someone say that humans are smart, people are stupid. And I think it's like holds true. I mean, if you sit down and talk to someone, you normally, I mean, can come to some kind of conclusion or some shared worldview. But it's the polarity and extremism of opinions today, especially on the internet, where you can hide a bit. Like you don't really have to confront the person that you're yelling at. I don't know. Probably sounding like an old man fossil right now, but it scares me a bit. And I think we need to educate ourselves around that much more than we do today.
I'm so tempted to go into the whole Facebook dilemma and issues.
Just go for it.
Okay, I mean, let's go there a bit more then. And I'm not sure if you watched the Congress hearing with Mark Zuckerberg like 2 years ago or something. I'm not sure when.
Parts of it.
Yeah, and I'm trying to phrase this in a nice way. I don't think that Mark Zuckerberg have, any evil intentions. I certainly don't do. I don't think any tech company actually do. I prefer to be an optimist. I prefer to think that they wouldn't, in any way think that let's just make more money, even though it may hurt young female girls. I do not believe that's the case, actually. No. Then people are still stupid. We don't know how to manage a powerful technology like AI, so it can be consequences that are unexpected that happens, right? Am I too optimistic here, you think? Or do you think there is people that have too much power today that, focus too much on monetary gains rather than even trying to be a good force in society?
Oh, that's a super difficult question. I think I'm aligned with you that I don't believe people. I don't believe most people are evil. I actually believe most people have very good intentions, and there is much more sort of uniting us than dividing us, actually, as human beings. But I think that it's quite easy to be trapped in a system where you're rewarded based on things that you might not necessarily you might do something and be rewarded for what you do rather than the consequences it has. And then it's somehow hard to point to blame, like whose fault is it and how to do it. And I think that's like, that culture can be reinforced, making it hard for people to actually just realize what's happening. And I think that's, I guess, a problem with Facebook and a lot of those companies that have, like, I don't know, but do they have control over the decisions of the algorithms? Do they know the consequences? Like, can they measure that far? And I don't think it's bad intent at all. I think it's good intent for most of the cases. And I mean, the premise of Facebook, it's a great idea. And I mean, it gives me a lot of positives. I'm by no means a heavy Facebook users, but I mean, I do use Messenger a lot. It gives me a lot of information. I hardly publish anything, but it's a lot of good things. But it's also comes with some side effects.
You have kids as well, right?
Yeah.
At what age approximately? Is
it? 12.
Yeah. And I guess they use a lot of social media and TikTok and whatnot, right? Are you afraid about that, or are you trying to manage that in some way?
Well, I try to manage it in terms of quantity, of course. I think it's time at 12 to, I mean, not only sort of consume things, but also like be creative in a way. So I've actually done some things now where I've forbidden my son on, like, Thursdays, there is like no screens whatsoever. Right. And that had a consequence that he started to cook, which is like just popped out of nowhere. So now he's super passionate into cooking, especially meat, which could be a problem in itself, but he likes that. So I told him once a week is fine. But then I feel a strong urge to teach him, like, I mean, TikTok is fine, but as long as you don't believe everything, you need to be critical of what you watch. And we have a lot of discussions about that. Like, well, is that really true? Do you think that makes sense? Is that reasonable? So it's a lot of, I feel that I need to educate him. And that was also why I forced him to watch Social Dilemma. That was like this exception for a Thursday with no screens. That was okay to watch.
And if we just take the whole, like, disinformation kind of potential challenge or problem that we have, and perhaps also in these kind of polarized times that we have in the world, where people are trying to portray an image of something happening, perhaps, but doing that in a very one-sided way, so to speak. And the answer probably is in the middle, a hybrid of both, as we've been speaking about a number of times. What do you think the solution for this is? How can we try to fight the disinformation and, I guess, fake news, if we call it that, that we are, I would argue, seeing in increased volumes over the years? Yeah,
I agree with you on that. I don't know, but I don't know. I sort of course, that's probably how I'm raised, and I'm probably biased that way. But I mean, it's in a somehow democratic society where you're elected on terms that and you have like an economic democratic system where you have people that probably like informed but fighting for a thing. I think that's good. I mean, with just recent things, it's dangerous when you select one set of thoughts that are okay and then you block everything else. I mean, it's super dangerous, and I don't know what the way around is. I don't know if it's Elon Musk's satellites to try to bypass that, or something else. But it's very dangerous because it's obvious that people are super susceptible to information provided, and I mean, I've been just also understanding my own ignorance about this, because I've been raised and been living in a country where information is available. I have the information. It's, I think, at least. But I think it's, if you're not, I think it's quite easy to be fed a set of beliefs and you actually believe that.
And just taking a concrete example, perhaps from Spotify as well, and there's been a big discussion around the Joe Rogan podcasts. Do you follow Joe Rogan, or do you?
I don't, but I was at Spotify at the time, so I have, of course, insights into also the internal debates around that.
And I guess the question then is that we'll always have content being published on some kind of platform that Spotify is. And then the question is also, when should you take ownership or responsibility for what's being published as a content, and when is the platform moving into more of like a media house that have some person responsible for all content being published? The same can be argued for Facebook or Google or whatever, of course. Do you think Spotify made the right decision in keeping Joe Rogan on and not censoring him in that way?
No, but I think so. I mean, just a disclaimer that I haven't listened to Joe Rogan's podcasts myself. We had a discussion actually with the Spotify team back in, I think it was in October, where we already discussed more or less like, is it not his existence on the platform? That I don't think anyone argued about, but that Spotify actually bought the rights.
Exclusive rights as well.
Exclusive rights. I think that, of course, needs to be evaluated. Is that aligned with the company values and stuff like that? So I understand that people have different opinions, but I think equally dangerous to allowing sort of bad things being circulated is also like the sort of cancel culture. I think that's also very dangerous.
Right.
Because
it's a balance as well. If you
because that can be, I mean, it can be applied from both directions.
Exactly.
So I'm also very afraid of that. And I think
good point.
Some things that Elon Musk said that, I mean, he allows now internet to a certain country that doesn't have access to it anymore.
Yeah.
But he refuses to drop the other countries' channels.
What was his quote? It was something, he's being an absolute...
Exactly, I'm like a fundamentalist when it comes to freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And I sort of think
and someone had to, have him at gunpoint to be able to censor things, right?
And I think, I would like to think that that's the way. And I hope that people are, or at least could be capable of dealing with conflicting pieces of information. But I think we need to, I mean, we're like the first generation born this way. I hope, I mean...
But perhaps, Twitter has a nice approach, I think. They are canceling so many things in Twitter. So I think that's perhaps going a bit too strongly. But they at least have some kind of like warning sign when something that they argue is potentially not accurate or factual correct, so to speak, right?
I mean, using an AI for fact-checking, I think would be a great thing.
Exactly, yes.
But then, of course, agreeing on what are the facts.
Yeah,
I mean, it's an
AGI problem.
What's the target variable?
We have to wait until we have AI system that's far succeeding the humans and have much more than human level intelligence to be able to know what the facts are.
But,
awesome, Daniel. Let's stop there. It's so easy to continue forever on these kind of topics, but let's continue that on the after work, I think.
Definitely.
Daniel, what's next in your life? What's happening professionally, privately, coming months?
Coming months, a lot of things. I mean, we're getting to school, obviously, so trying to figure that out. That's one exciting.
Are you moving in there in coming month?
I mean, we're not moving in, but we will prepare at least to live there. But I mean, the plan is, of course, to spend a big part of the summer.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of things like fixing the walls, checking up everything, and doing some fixes.
Right.
Other than that, I'm starting up. I mean, 2 projects, Fishbrain and ramping up at Volt. So that's super exciting, and some good progress. And also, of course, running a startup company is quite fun as well. Like, what is the next big fire to try to put out? Because that's...
Do you see yourself as more of a startup person rather than being employed at a bigger company, or what's your thinking there?
Yeah, but I think so. I think I found, I mean, I've tried tried my way around really small companies, really big companies. And I think maybe my sweet spot as an employee is somewhere like, I would say between like 200 and 800 people, where it's still like fairly nimble and lots of things happening. Yeah. I'm not a maintenance type of person. That's a realization that I made. I love approaching and like trying to define new problems and try to find solutions and build things. But I'm not a maintenance person. Yeah. So yeah. But now, of course, building a new company is fun. It's like so many things I have never done before. Like, how do you run marketing? How do you work with, sales? How do you formulate an offering that is understandable by the marketplace? It's so many things.
And I hope you do it in a data-driven way as well, right?
We're not. Okay. Not at all, actually. But it's like, again, that's probably, we're trying to find, and I guess that's same for all startups, like trying to find some product market fit and scale and speed. Yeah. Then, of course, a data-driven way. So, of course, we measure things, but it's, the volumes that we have right now, it's like I can keep them in my head still and for some time. But we have a very nice Google Cloud setup built on Terraform, like best practices. Nice. So we have a super advanced data platform.
So a good base
for internal use.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you have any people that you would recommend to come on this podcast?
That's super hard. I was thinking about that this morning, and then I dropped the ball. So I think, but let's go with like a cheating bet that I think you will have soon. Mikhail Shilkin, I think, is a person that I find, super knowledgeable and interesting to talk to. I had a privilege of working with him at Kambi, and now he's at Arsenal Football Club.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm being interested in sports as well. I think it will be interesting. I will meet up with him soon, and I think he will be on the channel soon as well. So.
Right, 24th of March.
Oh, yes.
So I think it would be interesting to hear his thoughts on a lot of things. You should ask him about sumo wrestling.
Oh, cool. Yeah, okay, yeah, that sounds interesting. Cool. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you here, Daniel. We will continue talking and speaking a lot of interesting things, I think, in coming hours. But thank you very much for coming to this podcast again. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you.